The anime begins with the protagonist, who is both the princess and the commander of the Third Order of the Imperial Army. She and her army are on a journey when they are ambushed by a giant monster that none of the soldiers can defeat because it is too strong. However, thanks to the princess and her sword, Excalibur, they manage to overcome it. Nonetheless, the reality is that the princess is captured by the hordes of hell, where the sword explains that long ago, the Imperial Army started a war with the Infernals, in which both were eventually defeated by the Infernals. Later, a young woman named Torture appears and demands that the princess reveal the Empire's secrets, but the sword is confident she won't say anything. So Torture proceeds to torture her. The protagonist assures them that no matter what they do, she will remain silent. That's when the torture chamber opens, and to Excalibur's surprise, the torture turns out to be toast. Torture begins to display the toast, and the sword believes it's a pathetic attempt, confident that the princess won't fall for it. However, as she watches, the commander of the army becomes completely mesmerized by the toast. She tries to resist, but since it's a human world delicacy, she begins to be transported to another realm, where she can see its harvest and feels the urge to taste it. She tries to resist as much as she can, but when she sees Torture dipping the toast into a small sauce to taste it, the princess rushes toward her but cannot stop her, finally giving up and declaring that she will talk. After confessing the Empire's secrets, the princess asks to enjoy the toast and her suffering, to which Torture replies that since the secrets were important, she will give the protagonist a feast, which they all share together. However, later, Torture discusses with one of her companions that they need more information about the Empire, and the young woman says they will have to torture the princess daily. The next day, Torture arrives where the princess and her companion are being held. Excalibur remarks that they won't be able to extract any more information since the princess satisfied her appetite with the toast. However, the demons bring a cart of festival foods, which the princess cannot resist because she's always envied the townsfolk who got to enjoy these treats. Now, this is her chance, and she doesn't waste it. After the princess confesses where the Empire's most powerful weapon is located, Torture reports this to the Demon King's assistant, Kanag, who claims that the Demon King cannot wield such a powerful weapon. Therefore, they need to find another method of torture to gather more useful information. The next day, Torture goes to the princess's quarters at night. Excalibur and the princess assume that the torture will be sleep deprivation, something the young woman is accustomed to, so she claims it won't be a problem. But they are wrong. Torture brings a bowl of ramen, intending to soften the princess and make her confess more imperial secrets. Although she tries to resist again, she can't help herself and ends up eating the ramen and confessing. Torture reports this to the Demon King's assistant, who demands more information, and two young men appear, claiming they will take over the task. The next day, the princess remains in prison, and this time Torture brings two assistants to carry out the day's torture. They are Lieutenants Yuki and Inky. Upon seeing them, Excalibur feels that using two rookies is a waste of time, as they won't be able to handle the princess. However, she then sees that the two lieutenants pull out a video game, at which they are very skilled and start battling. The princess is curious about this, though she tries to resist, as she was trained to be strong. Nonetheless, Torture convinces the princess to join them, and they all play together. Thus, the four of them spend the day playing a fighting video game, where they feel happy and are transported to that fantasy world, beginning to fight. Incredibly, the princess's strength and power surpass that of the torturers, and she ends up winning, receiving praise from her rivals, who suggest having another match. After the video games, the princess speaks again and confesses that one of the Empire's gates is unguarded on Wednesdays. The princess wishes she could play again, but regrets saying it since her rivals are the enemies. However, Yuki and Inky say they now consider her their friend and will return to torture her, which makes the princess happy because she will be able to play again. As a result, they exchange phone numbers. That night, Torture sends the information to the Demon King's assistant, who relays it to his boss. However, the girl must gather more intel, so she can't be done with the princess's task yet. At that moment, she remembers that one of her companions is finishing a job. The next day, a new girl named Crawl arrives, a beast tamer. Excalibur says there will be no problem since the princess once defeated thousands of beasts on her own without messing up her hair. However, Crawl calls upon her beast for the torture, leaving everyone in suspense, but when they see it, the princess feels tenderness. It's a small polar bear. She tries to resist, but Crawl forces the princess to pity the bear as the villainess took away the animal's toy ball, making it sad. However, the princess notices that even the tamer herself feels sorry for the animal, and after confessing, she begins to cry because she dislikes seeing animals suffer. Witnessing this, Excalibur feels that they finally won, but the princess admits she was moved and will confess as a result. Later, they put the princess to the test again by sending her to another location. When they finally arrive at the destination, she realizes they're in hot springs, and in front of her is a woman, the next torturer, named Giant. She says she brought the princess here because it's a nice place to relax, and since she's a princess, she's probably often stared at. However, Excalibur assures that her princess won't fall for such charms, but when he looks at her, he sees she's fascinated and relaxed in the waters. Even though she's enjoying the moment, she insists she won't give in as she was never pampered, but admits she was sometimes a bit spoiled. Upon hearing this, Giant feels sorry for the girl and immediately approaches her. At that moment, the princess remembers her mother and allows herself to be pampered by the giant since she feels so small beside her. After this, the princess reveals more secrets of the empire, but the Demon King needs more information, so Torture wonders how to proceed. Later, Torture brings a box of chocolate-filled cookies. Excalibur knows this is pointless since the princess only delights in luxury food and sweets. However, the princess confesses that her butler named Jimochi bought her the same treats when they attended lessons, but he only gave her one cookie, which makes the sword think the old man is to blame for being stingy with the princess. Torture begins eating the cookies, and to everyone's surprise, the princess feels nothing as she watches her eat, as it seems she can resist. However, at one point she remembers that the cookies have pictures on them, so the princess asks Torture to at least stop so she can see the designs on the cookies. But Torture keeps eating without stopping, and the princess can no longer take it, asking her to stop since the animal shapes have different meanings. In the end, the princess says she will talk if Torture stops, which she does, and she obtains information about the queen's dress size. Torture says she will give this information to the Demon King, and if it's not useful, she will return, leaving the princess with one cookie, which makes her happy since it's the lucky cookie. The next day, a knight arrives at the place where the princess is imprisoned, saying he is there to rescue her. Meanwhile, Yuki and Inky invite the princess to an amusement park, but she says she can't go because she's a prisoner. The torturers then suggest she ask Torture for permission, as she might let her go. However, later on, Torture forbids her from leaving but offers a deal. If the princess reveals another secret, she might be able to go since her minions likely invited her with good intentions. Excalibur warns his princess not to be so easily deceived. Time passes and the princess refuses to speak because she and Excalibur feel it was all a trap to make her confess another secret. Torture tries to convince her, even telling her that if she accepts the deal, she will be sent in a cute outfit via teleportation. At that moment, the princess receives messages from Yuki and Inky, telling her they will wait for her since the amusement park is starting. At that moment, the princess realizes their friendship is real, begins to cry, and says she will reveal another secret. Finally, the princess reunites with the rookie torturers and enjoys a lovely afternoon with them along with Torture and her monster assistant. They even watch the fireworks together. At the end of the night, Torture calls the Demon King to relay the new secret revealed about the Empire, but doesn't seem very important, so they decide the next one to handle the task will be the Demon King's daughter. Meanwhile, the knight remains outside the Infernal Palace, waiting to rescue the princess. The next day, Torture arrives at the princess's chambers and bows before her, leading the princess to think it's because she finally acknowledges how strong and great she is. But that's not the case, as she introduces the Demon King's daughter, Mao Mao, a little girl who is also an advanced apprentice of General Torment. Upon seeing her, the princess feels a surge of tenderness and even asks her age. Excalibur warns his commander not to be fooled, as she is the enemy's daughter. Mao Mao confesses that she's not good at torture, although everyone expects great things from her because of her father. The princess encourages her, saying that if she keeps trying, she will go far, and even asks her to try torturing her, which makes Excalibur feel that she shouldn't be motivating her enemies. The little girl then tries her torture by using a plastic bag full of bubbles, trying to make the princess jealous enough to confess. The princess resists with all her might, but only because it doesn't affect her, as the girl really isn't very good. In the end, a little girl feels so sad because she ran out of bubbles and knows she can't continue. Seeing her so upset, the princess decides to confess, revealing the Empire's secret code. After the torture, Mao Mao and the princess decide to play for a while Kanag takes the secret code to the Demon King. The king says he'll send it to his commander, but since it's his daughter's first successful task, he'll frame it. Meanwhile, the knight is casting a spell around the Infernal Palace. The next day, Torture arrives at the chambers dressed in Chinese attire, telling the princess that today's torture is Chinese food. Excalibur begins to worry because it's the princess's favorite food and he knows she won't be able to resist. However, the princess confesses that Jimochi used to take her to Chinese restaurants after lessons, and it's something she loved, although the food Torture brought her doesn't appeal to her because it always ended up burnt. Excalibur thinks this is a pathetic excuse. After hearing this, Torture admits to the prisoner that she's been eating it wrong, showing her that she must first break the wrapper so the soup comes out and cools, and then she can enjoy the food. At that moment, the princess wishes she could try the food and ends up confessing. Thanks to this, the Demon King gains new information. On Sundays, security is light, making it easier for them to attack. Meanwhile, the knight finishes his spell. That night, a voice wakes the princess, and she sees it's the White Knight of the First Imperial Legion, Loch Britain, a knight all the girls were in love with and wanted to marry. She immediately feels like she's the chosen one, but when the knight removes his helmet, she sees he's actually an old man, which disappoints her. Nevertheless, they decide to flee using a spell. The knight holds the princess and begins to chant his spell, but this starts to make the princess uncomfortable. Unable to tolerate it, she pushes the knight away, causing him to disappear, leaving the princess imprisoned again, waiting for someone else to come and rescue her. After Torture extracts the last bit of information from the princess, she meets with the Demon King, who is not very satisfied with her performance as head of Torture. He wants to strip her of her title if she can't uncover important secrets, and to test her, he asks her to torture him so he can see how she performs her job. Later, the torture session begins and Torture brings out a can of beer, which Kanag believes won't work. However, the Demon King realizes that Torture selects her tortures based on her victims, and in his case, he loves beer. She starts demonstrating how to properly serve a glass of beer, and at first the king notices he's been doing it wrong, making him nervous. But finally, when he sees the foam rising above the glass, he feels the urge to taste it. His assistant tells him to resist, and the king insists that he has always resisted and fought through all his battles, even the toughest ones. But when he sees the foam starting to disappear, he can't resist any longer and gives in. As he enjoys the beer, the Demon King exclaims that it feels like he's in heaven, with little angels around him, as the drink is refreshing and delicious. Torture then suggests that he try new things. The next day, Torture arrives at the chambers, and Excalibur says it doesn't matter what they do, the princess will confess anyway because he has lost faith in her. When the princess hears this, she feels bad and vows to resist this time. However, the Torturer brings in a blacksmith because this time, the torture is aimed at the sword. Excalibur is confident that it will be difficult to make him reveal any secrets, but the blacksmith begins by removing his rust, which brings satisfaction to the sword. Even so, he doesn't confess anything. Then they proceed to sharpen him, and Excalibur starts to feel different. As being a sacred sword, he can now cut through flesh like a katana. However, he continues to resist. But when the blacksmith removes her outfit and declares her intention to finish the job, the sword gives in, confessing that there are two swords that are a couple, now polished and shining like a new weapon. That night, Excalibur apologizes to the princess, thinking she is upset, but she assures him that it was also difficult for her, and now they must work harder to resist the tortures. The next day, Kral returns to the princess to continue her work. The prisoner is happy to see her, though she was hoping to see the little polar bear again. Kral, however, invites her to her home to spend time together, but she's there to work and asks her partner to come in. Both Excalibur and the princess are shocked to see it's a mad wolf. The princess feels no fear as she has previously taken down many of them, but Excalibur reminds her that this is a different species of wolf, as they are more powerful. The giant wolf raises its paw, and the prisoners are frightened by the sight of its claws. However, Kral shows that they are the softest, most tender paws with a lovely scent. The princess shows no interest, confessing that she has never smelled the paws of animals. Kral can't believe what she's hearing and asks her to smell them in exchange for a secret. Kral then reveals a secret about her boss, Torture. When the princess accepts, she only comments that they smell like an animal, but later, she starts to detect the scent of popcorn and realizes the paws are indeed very soft. She ends up confessing another secret. Afterward, with permission from the chief torturer, they all go to Kral's house to spend time with the cute little animals. The next day, Mao Mao takes the princess to a park for the next torture session, where she watches Mao Mao play and enjoy the day. The prisoner films her but assures herself that this time she will resist, as she was forbidden to play in parks or interact with others when she was young. However, in that moment, she begins to cry because she had always longed to share moments with other children. Mao Mao then invites her to play, and the princess accepts, confessing another secret. Despite everything, the princess, Excalibur, and all the torturers enjoy a lovely day together in the park. Later, the Demon King is informed of the new information revealing the Empire's password, but the king forgets where he left the note because he's too busy watching the recordings of his daughter having fun at the park. The next day, Torture takes the princess and Excalibur to the river. The prisoner says this time she'll resist, and no matter how much they try to tempt her to play in the river, she won't fall for it. However, the torturer admits they won't be playing in the river, which saddens the princess because she had been looking forward to it. She soon learns they are actually there to roast marshmallows. The young girl says she doesn't like them because they're sticky, but Torture explains they can be toasted, and she makes a small campfire to roast the marshmallows. The princess isn't very interested at first, but that only lasts a few seconds. She immediately jumps with joy to try one and is completely amazed, feeling as if she's been transported to a world of soft clouds. Torture then tells her that if she confesses a secret, she can eat another one. Without thinking, the princess says she could tell her 4 secrets in exchange for 4 marshmallows, but that wasn't necessary. Just 1 secret was enough. Later, the princess enjoys her treat and is given permission to play in the river. Meanwhile, Torture reports the confession to her boss, but Kanagi tells her it's not enough and urges her to get more information while the princess is in the river. Because of this, the torturer feels sad, thinking her prisoner won't be able to endure another round of torture. She starts doubting her abilities while the princess and Excalibur notice Torture is upset. The sword urges her not to pity her, suggesting it could be a trap. The commander insists she's strong, but she gives in anyway, sits beside her, and reveals a secret about the king. This cheers up the torturer, who feels happy that the princess thought of her, and they decide to enjoy the river together. At that moment, Yuki and Inky arrive as Torture had informed them. After the interrogation, the girls spent a lovely day at the river where they fished, ate, filmed some videos, and played. Despite a few small accidents, they all had fun together. By the time they returned, including the princess, they were all exhausted. Upon returning to the chief interrogator's chambers, Torture reports the new confessions to the Demon King, but he tells her they are useless, so she'll have to keep working. The next day, Giant shows up and notices the princess is very tanned, so she invites her to the sauna to relax. While there, the prisoner starts thinking she's sweating too much due to the heat, assuming this is an attempt to torture her into talking. However, she resolves to resist, remembering how she endured the hottest deserts during time. At that moment, she begins to find the sauna quite enjoyable, thinking it's fine to sweat from time to time. Later, Giant says it's time to leave, as staying too long during a first visit isn't good for anyone. The princess didn't want to leave, but she realizes that the fresh air outside feels great as well. Afterward, they head to a pool to cool off, and there the princess begins to feel like water itself, completely relaxed. In the end, both of them take a nap, which causes the princess to confess another secret. That night, the princess faces another torture challenge where a bunch of monsters are present. She recognizes one of them because she defeated it in the past and assumes the challenge is to defeat all the monsters she's beaten before. But that's not the case. Torture explains it was actually Yuki's idea to have the monsters hide in the abandoned school to scare her. However, the prisoner wonders where Yuki is, and when she learns Yuki is sick, she gets worried and confesses before the torture even starts. Later, they all went to visit Yuki because they were concerned. The princess tells her that her idea was great, but she gave up right away. The girl will spend the night taking care of Yuki. On a new day, Mao Mao is promoted for her great performance, moving from Lieutenant of Torture to Commander of Torture. She's granted a wish, and the Demon King tells her to ask for whatever she wants. Nervously, the girl requests that he carry her since he is her father, and she had always wanted him to, but held back because he needed to maintain the appearance of a dark figure. After confessing this, Mao regrets it, but the Demon King grants her request as he had always wanted to carry his daughter as well. Later, the Demon King carries his daughter around his quarters, and Mao is very happy, saying she feels tall. After walking around the place, the king admits he had fun and asks his daughter to confess what else she wanted to do with him. Embarrassed, she says she wants to play house. Without hesitation, the king plays the role of the baby, asking his mother for food while Mao serves it. Then they play horsey and other games. Both are satisfied because for the first time, they act as father and daughter. The king admits that sometimes it's necessary to forget appearances, and next time he attends a concert, he won't just stand there, but will go to the front. Afterward, father and daughter decide to go to the park to spend some time together. They play sports with the Demon King teaching his daughter to ride a bike, and they play baseball. After resting a bit, they blow on small flowers. This concludes their father-daughter day as Mao falls completely asleep upon returning. The Demon King tells his assistant that he doesn't have time for the prisoner's confessions because he needs to put his daughter to bed. When he tucks Mao in, he sees that she has drawn a cute picture of the two of them, which makes him happy. However, he doesn't realize that on the back of the drawing is the password to the Imperial Army. Later, the princess starts saying a lot of words, and Excalibur acknowledges that she has a very good vocabulary. The princess confesses that she was always educated by many high-ranking teachers, though the sword notes that she's unusually calm for the day of her torture. At that moment, Torture and her assistant arrive, and according to Excalibur, they bring heavy weaponry, as this time they pull out a large iron rod heated by fire. Both prisoners feel that the good treatment has come to an end. Despite denying it, the princess begins trembling with fear. However, the torture turns out to be melted cheese, as they use the hot iron to melt it and serve it with a large meal. The princess can't resist and ends up giving in. That night, Torture remembers that she won't be able to torture the princess the next day. The following day, Torture arrives at the quarters and tells her prisoners that it's been a month since they arrived, and as is customary in the place, they need to do checkups to ensure they're healthy and safe. This seems odd to Excalibur, but they agree to the checkups. However, when the princess sees the syringe, she starts trembling, afraid of being hurt, and says she'll confess. Her companions don't understand, and she explains that it's a habit to confess, though she still refuses to be injected because she's afraid of needles. The sword tells her not to be afraid, as she's been wounded many times on the battlefield, but the princess insists it's different. Hearing this, Torture says she doesn't want to hurt her either, so she uses anesthesia on the area. Thanks to this, she's able to do her job, and then they proceed to check the sword, finding that both are healthy. Still, they manage to obtain some secrets that aren't very useful. Meanwhile, the knight is outside the prison, determined to rescue the princess this time, as he says he was so focused on his spell that he didn't realize he had let her go. That night, the knight arrives at the quarters where the princess is sleeping, having knocked out many guards. He tells the prisoner that this time he has a new spell for teleportation that doesn't require physical contact. The princess is pleased and agrees, but then learns that the spell first transports their clothes and then them. When the knight begins his spell, she starts to get nervous because she isn't ready to be without clothes. However, remembering the many battles she's fought, she tries to stay calm. But as she watches her clothes start to disappear, she begins to panic, unsure of how to stop the knight, who is fully focused on his spell. She starts thinking that if she escapes him again, Louch will return and she'll have to keep running from him, making him come back many times. In the end, she has no choice but to finish him off with her sword, Excalibur. The next day, Torture brings new clothes for the prisoner, though she doesn't understand how she managed to tear her clothes and the princess doesn't want to confess. A few days later, Kral visits the princess once again to make her confess another secret, and to do so, he brings along two small cats named Mike and Shiro. The princess sees that they are very cute but says she can resist them. However, Shiro falls asleep on her lap, causing her legs to go numb after a while. The prisoner thinks it's not a problem since she's fought in great battles, while Excalibur wonders why she doesn't just move the cat off her legs. The princess insists that she can't wake the kitten, though she forgot that Mike is also there. Mike enjoys being petted and getting affection, so he approaches and begins to stroke the princess's feet, which makes her give in because she starts to get cramps. She says she won't forgive herself, but when Mike gets closer, she forgives him because he's so adorable, and then she feeds him. After this, Torture reports the new information to Kinaj, but he informs her that the boss is not around because there will be a sports festival where Mao is participating and he wants a good spot to watch his daughter. This gives the Torturer a great idea, as she plans to take the princess to the event. The next day is the Infernal Sports Festival. The prisoners, along with the torturers, go to cheer on Mao. After a cute presentation by some little infernal children, it's Mao's turn. The Demon King has a great spot to watch his daughter, though he has some small problems with the recorder and blames humans for it. Finally, it's Mao's turn, and with her is a small boy. Inky says that her brother Insuk is also in the race, and the princess notices that he looks just like her friend. When the race starts, everyone cheers for Mao, but she doesn't win because Insuk beats her. However, this doesn't cause any issues as it's a festival and the kids are having fun anyway. Later, there's a game between students and parents, and for the first time, the princess and Excalibur see the Demon King, the great enemy of the Imperial Army. They start to think it might be a double, because they can't believe the great leader would attend a festival like this. However, after the parent-child race, the Demon King notices the princess's presence and his assistant remarks that it seems like the prisoner is having a good time. The Demon King replies that she shouldn't be because later she'll face hell when they go head-to-head. Then everyone takes a short break to have lunch. Torture says she prepared food for everyone and hopes they enjoy it. The princess is very happy but wonders if this is also part of the torture. The interrogator assures her that they rest on weekends so she can eat in peace. Everyone is impressed by the meal, and they notice that the Demon King and his family are eating together nearby, suggesting that he put effort into preparing something delicious for them as well. Later in the afternoon, there's a relay race where participants must retrieve specific objects. The Demon King tells his assistant that in this challenge, you will face the princess, surprising Kinaj. The presenter explains the game, saying that during the race, the children must reach the first checkpoint, where there will be a piece of paper indicating the object they need to retrieve. The Demon King mentions that he prepared something special in advance, placing a paper for his daughter that says she must choose someone she likes, ensuring that Mao will choose him instead of the princess. Once the race begins, all the children reach the first checkpoint. Mao picks up her paper and sees that she must choose someone she likes. The princess feels nervous, thinking that Mao might choose her. But instead, the girl goes in another direction. While the Demon King waits for his daughter, she ends up choosing her mother, Lulun, and the two of them run toward the finish line. This is the first time the princess sees Lulun. At that moment, a boy approaches asking for a sacred sword, and Excalibur goes with him. All the children race toward the finish line, but in the end, Mao wins. Despite not being chosen, the Demon King feels happy for his daughter, realizing it's the consequence of not spending enough time with her. At the end, the Demon King gives a speech to the children who participated, and as they are about to leave, Lulun and Mao approach the princess. Lulun thanks the princess for taking care of her daughter, and the princess feels that Lulun is a kind woman. Despite having a good day, the prisoner decides to confess another secret anyway. On a new day, Yuiki and Inky reminisce about the time when they were just students and had to choose their career paths to start their futures. Inky said she would choose to be an interrogator because she wanted to make people smile, but needed to work on it. However, Yuki didn't know what to do because she wasn't sure what she liked. Her friend was about to suggest they pursue the same career together, but she didn't have the courage, so she told Yuki to follow something she enjoyed. But since Yuki liked being with Inky, she said she would also choose the career of an interrogator, which made both of them happy. Although now they must take an exam to be promoted, despite their efforts, the Demon King tells them they failed. Later, the torturers visit the princess to tell her they failed the exam and ask her for advice on how to make the Demon King confess through their tortures. Excalibur finds it odd that they are asking her for advice as they are enemies, but the princess says that besides being enemies, they are also friends. She advises them that they need to use something he likes, as knowing his tastes might help them face him. At that moment, the girls have an idea that might work, so now they must wait for the exam to be held again. Then Inky and Yuiki are once again taking the promotion exam, but the Demon King isn't impressed, seeing that they are trying the same approach. However, the girls have a trick up their sleeves. They brought Mao along to perform her dance with them. At that moment, the boss can't resist, so during the torture, he ends up confessing that he enjoys anime openings. After this, the Demon King joins their little dance and promotes both girls as well as Mao. The next day, the princess has a nice bath with Giant. Afterward, both are satisfied, and the prisoner comments that she has already had her torturer's day and confessed again, so the woman invites her to get some ice cream. Upon leaving the prison, the princess feels good to breathe the fresh air after a bath, but she remembers that in her empire, she was forbidden from going outside, so she never got to stroll around. When Giant hears this, she decides to take a different path so they can talk for a bit longer. Along the way, the woman shows the girl the different stars in the sky, something the princess had never observed for so long. Both stay there to make a wish, though neither wants to confess what it is because it's a secret. When they reach the shop, they end up eating meat buns because the walk made them hungry, though Giant claims she got lost along the way. On their return, they once again decide to take the longer route to spend more time together. Meanwhile, a girl is in her room in the infernal realm, saying that the princess has only been subjected to soft tortures, but that's about to end. The next day, Torture introduces the prisoner to a new torturer named Vanilla Peschuts. Upon hearing her name, Excalibur knows she comes from a very fearsome family, which makes the princess now fear for her life. Vanilla says she's going to take her to a place where she'll have no choice but to confess to save herself, and that place is the amusement park, where the princess will have to ride the giant roller coaster. However, the torturer is surprised to see that the prisoner is excited because she wants to ride it. This doesn't sit well with Vanilla, especially when Torture tells her to ride with the princess in case she confesses at a high point. The two of them get on the roller coaster, and while the princess is thrilled, Vanilla is the complete opposite, begging the prisoner to confess something so they can get off. But it's too late. As the ride starts, when they pass the first section, the roller coaster begins to climb again, and without realizing it, out of fear, Vanilla starts revealing one of her secrets. The princess notices this and asks her to hold her hand to help calm her down, after which the torturer doesn't feel as scared. At the end, Peschuts admits she lost, so the princess can ask her to confess something. In this case, she asks Vanilla to choose the attraction she likes most so they can have fun. The girls end up spending a nice afternoon together. That night, Vanilla looks at the photos they took and can't believe that someone like her, from such a strong family, failed at her job. Yet despite that, she still had a lovely day. A few days later, the princess sees on her phone that the head of interrogations is on vacation. Torture says she's on a business trip, which is very exhausting, but at the end of the day, she decides to eat something before bed. She treats herself to some food, preparing a ham and cheese burrito with sausage, but it wasn't very delightful for her, so she follows it with some ramen. The next day, she chooses to have breakfast at the hotel, picking out some bread to try, and she's very pleased with them. On a Sunday, Bruce the Destroyer receives a message saying that the Demon King has injured his hand. The monster remembers that the day before he sensed a great power but doesn't know what his boss could have faced. However, the day before, the Demon King had spent time with his family because Mao wanted to bake delicious cookies. With her mother's help, they started preparing them, but they had to wait 20 minutes for the butter to melt. Luckily, the Demon King was there, and with his power, he melted the butter in seconds. They continued with the process, during which Mao even learned how to crack an egg. Once the dough was ready, they all started shaping the cookies, and Mao declared she would make the biggest one. When they finished, Lulun took the cookies out of the oven, but Mao's excitement caused her mother to drop the tray. Fortunately, the Demon King saved both the tray and the cookies, though he injured himself in the process. His young daughter then tended to his wounds, and in the end, they all enjoyed the cookies they had made. Meanwhile, Bruce wondered who could have been responsible for the injury. The next day was the princess's torture day, but before it began, Torture gave the girls some cookies that Mao had sent her, which made her happy. However, the interrogator reminded her that they were now enemies again but would go back to normal afterward. In this case, Torture brought tea to torture the princess, as their investigators discovered that she used to enjoy it, especially during small tea festivals. At that moment, the princess recalled fond memories but quickly corrected them, saying that she didn't actually like tea, she only drank it out of obligation. She confessed that what she really liked were sodas, which her butler used to give her after her studies. Torture then began preparing the tea, but the princess was more resilient this time, knowing she had Mao's cookies to enjoy. However, after tasting the cookies, she realized they would go perfectly with tea, making her immediately confess. In the end, she and her friend Torture enjoyed a small tea party together. The following day, Vanilla returned, seeking revenge. She presented the princess with a strawberry cake, thinking that this time she wouldn't be able to resist and would give in, especially when she learned it was homemade. However, Excalibur started criticizing the cake, saying it wasn't appetizing due to its poor appearance. This hurt the torturer's pride and she became saddened. But the princess corrected her friend, explaining that she could tell the cake was made with love and care, and that they only wanted her to truly enjoy it. This moved Vanilla to tears, and she surrendered, letting the princess taste the cake without having to confess. Later, Kanaj commented that Vanilla had failed twice in her interrogation, and he believed they would need to take extreme measures. On a new day, it's time for Torture, and they take the princess to the beach to play a game of fencing. Torture explains the rules. The goal is to pop the opponent's balloon. If the princess loses, she must confess another secret, but if she wins, she can ask for whatever she desires, including her freedom. The match will pit the prisoner against Yuki and Inky. As the battle begins, the princess shows no fear and quickly defeats Inky. She declares herself the commander of the Imperial Legion, mentioning that she had a great teacher by her side, Jimochi, with whom she used to play in the Empire's courtyard. Excalibur, however, doesn't believe that playing in a courtyard counts as proper training. Nevertheless, Yuki isn't ready to give up and pulls out her secret weapon, shooting to pop the princess's balloon. But for her opponent, dodging the attacks is far too easy. Torture starts to worry that she may have to free the princess and desperately wishes she could interfere, but she knows that would break the rules, so she tries to think of another way out. Meanwhile, the princess is about to defeat her final opponent, but at that moment, all the torturers arrive to join the battle against her. She prepares to face them all, defeating several in the process. However, Mad Wolf ends up attacking Yuki, turning the situation into an all-out brawl where everyone has fun together. That night, the princess returns to her quarters exhausted from the fun and decides to rest, although Excalibur knows that by winning the battle, she should have been freed. Later that night, the White Knight returns, this time determined to free the princess, but the Demon King appears behind him, startling the man. Louch immediately launches an attack with everything he's got, but the Demon King casually explains that he was just passing by after attending a concert. For the first time, he didn't stay at the back but moved up closer to feel more a part of the show. Louch, uninterested in these comments, unleashes his most powerful attack, thinking he has defeated the king, but to his surprise, he has not. As he falls in shock, the Demon King saves him, confessing that he didn't plan to hurt him and also noticed that Louch was wearing a symbol similar to one from an anime he likes. The two then start talking about anime, and by the end, Louch decides to leave, reminding himself that the Infernal Boss and his demons are still his enemies, even though not all demons are bad. As they part, they agree to meet again to discuss anime further. Later that night, Vanilla is in her room playing cards alone. She begins to feel like she'd enjoy having a friend, but quickly reminds herself of who she is and that her family doesn't need friends. Still, she recalls how much fun she had at the amusement park and decides to torture the princess so they can play together. The next day, Vanilla arrives at the princess's quarters and tells her that today's torture will be a game of cards. Excalibur feels this is a very weak form of torture, but the princess enjoys playing as she used to do so with Jimochi. However, this time, she decides to resist, frustrating the torturer. Both prisoners realize Vanilla's true intentions, and despite the young girl's denial, the princess admits that she didn't think she wanted friends either, but now it's something she would like. They end up playing cards, with Vanilla ultimately losing to her prisoner. The Demon King is informed that the torturer and the princess have become friends, which makes him happy since he, too, has managed to make a friend. A few days later, Kroll returns to interrogate the princess again, this time using an adorable puppy. However, the young girl insists that no matter how much she tries, it won't work because she's not very fond of dogs. Yet she sees the puppy searching for its ball and coming back, which endears the princess to it. She realizes she's fallen into a trap, but decides to continue resisting. Kroll lets her know that the puppy wants to keep playing and even lies down to receive affection. This causes the princess to give in and confess. Then the assistant informs the Demon King that the princess has drawn a map of the Empire, which he knows will be useful. He requests that Geku, the Dark Ninja, be called. However, this presents a problem because when Geku arrives, Kanade mentions that the ninja has decided to leave to pursue his dream and only join Hell to continue his family's work. Seeing the Demon King, Geku regrets his decision and wishes to stay with him, but the king urges him to follow his dreams, even though it might be a bit late. Later, the princess falls asleep after eating, so Torture tries to wake her up to work. In her dreams, the girl gets everything she desires, from food to cute animals, leading her to say she will give in and confess her secrets. Unbeknownst to her, she confesses them out loud, which Torture overhears. Excalibur pleads for the princess to wake up, but hears one of the confessions in which she thanks him for encouraging her in battles. Then the interrogator hears her thanking him for the delicious meals she receives, prompting them to let her rest. That night, the princess finally wakes up, realizing that there was no torture, so she thinks she has won this time. During the night, the researchers are performing a spell but lose control, causing all the demons to turn small. The next day, Torture arrives at the princess's quarters, and despite the Demon King asking her to take the day off, she decides to continue her work because she wants to know if she can extract information even in that state. The princess feels a lot of affection seeing her, but is confident she won't give in. Torture pulls out some candies and asks the princess to choose one. Nobody expected her to pick the biggest one, so a prisoner gives it to the girl, and seeing her so happy makes the princess end up confessing, which delights Torture. This information reaches the Demon King, but the other torturers arrive at the quarters looking like little girls and ask the princess to play. She agrees, ignoring Excalibur's warnings, thinking it's a good moment to escape. The next day, Torture returns as a teenager, so she has to wait another day to return to normal. She's ready for the torture but feels a bit embarrassed since she doesn't remember how to cook very well from her past, making her unsure about how the stew turned out. The princess feels compassion for her and decides to be her bait to taste it, which she finds delightful, saying it's delicious. This makes Torture happy, and she even gathers more information since the prisoner talks again. The following day, Torture returns to normal and is very ready for her work. This time it involves pizza. The princess begins to get anxious since it's her favorite food, but Excalibur, lacking faith in her, says that all foods are her favorites. The prisoner points out that it's possible she might get pizza she doesn't like because there are so many varieties. However, Torture brings a brochure since they will order delivery, and she can choose any type she likes only if she confesses. The princess tries to resist, but upon hearing that she can choose 4 types of pizza, she agrees to confess. Meanwhile, the Demon King welcomes the Dark Ninja, who has succeeded in pursuing his dream and made the anime he released a hit. A few days later, Vanilla is in her room and starts thinking about wanting to spend time with the princess. However, she feels that it would be beneath her due to her last name. Still, she considers the princess her first friend and knows it's not about her last name but her own lack of courage to do it. She is determined to invite her out but isn't sure where they can go. The next day, the prisoner watches a video of herself skating with Jimochi, who is very good at it. As she watches the video, she expresses a desire to be able to skate, but hidden away is Vanilla, listening to everything. Then the head of the Pestvix family, Aliato, rushes into the main hall to tell his wife that they must cancel their reservations at the ice rink because Vanilla has confessed she wants to go with her new friend. This puts them on alert, and they immediately cancel everything and reserve it for their daughter, while Vanilla prepares for her afternoon with the princess. The following day, Vanilla takes the princess and Excalibur to the ice rink, where the girl says that this place belongs to her family and now they have it just for themselves, thanks to their parents. However, the prisoner thinks this is just another form of torture. So she says she will resist this time and let Vanilla skate alone to see if she feels the urge to join in. This torments the girl, as this wasn't part of the plan. When Vanilla enters the rink, she remembers that she doesn't know how to skate, and she's about to fall, but before she hits the ground, she is saved by the princess, who arrives quickly. The princess says that by entering, she accepts her defeat, which makes the girl cry because she knows that she doesn't need to confess. This makes the prisoner suspicious, so when she finds out what it's about, she says she will confess how to skate properly. Both of them then have a lovely day skating, while Excalibur also enjoys skating. The next day, Torture arrives in the quarters and sees that the princess and Excalibur aren't feeling well. The prisoner tries to hide it, but the interrogator notices that she has a slight fever, which is concerning in humans, so she decides to cancel the torture sessions and takes care of her. The girl protests, but upon seeing how they treat her, she changes her mind and even ends up pleased with the care, ultimately falling asleep peacefully, just like the sword. The following day, the princess is fully recovered, but there is something that saddens Torture, which the prisoner notices. She confesses that this could be their last day together since they are awaiting news to see if they will be transferred to another area or place. This also makes the princess sad, and she says that this time she won't give in so easily, especially not alone. So Torture asks for support, and all the torturers go to the princess. Finally, they publish the news, and Torture is happy not to be transferred. The princess arrives with Inky and Yuki, as they will continue working together. After a few days, the princess wakes up alongside Excalibur and the Demon King, who tells them that they were playing basketball when a lightning bolt struck them, transporting them to another world. However, when he woke up, he decided to investigate the place and discovered it was ruled by a dark monarch. He faced many warriors until finally confronting him, but his powers did not harm him. However, he used the strength of his fists to defeat him and then returned to the cabin where they had woken up. Later, the townspeople realize that the evil monarch has been defeated, so they are grateful to their savior, although they do not know who he is. Meanwhile, the princess and the Demon King finally return to their world to continue their game.